Ladies and gentlemen, your event will now begin. Jeff, please go ahead.
Thank you, Zach, and hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Metz, and I'd like to welcome you to this month's Tech Showcase for Credit Union Times with sponsor Effectiv. Before I hand it off to Ann Legg, our moderator, I want to go over some basic housekeeping items about the webcast console. This event is completely interactive and features many customizable functions. Every window you currently see, from the slide window to the Q&A panel, can either be enlarged or collapsed. So if you'd like to change the look and feel of your console, go right ahead. If you have a question for our presenter, please enter it in the Q&A widget on your console. We work to get to your questions during the Q&A at the end of the showcase segment, so please ask away. If we don't get to your question, you may receive an email response. Also, there will be a poll question during this event, so when it comes up, please answer as best matches your experience, and we'll take a look at those results live. There are also some resources available in the Resources tab, so feel free to review at your own leisure. And now I'm going to hand it off to Ann Legg, who's CEO and founder of Thrive Strategic Services, and who will moderate today's presentation. Ann?
Thank you so very much, Jeff. Okay, so today we're talking about security, all right? And let's just take a moment and kind of think about the environment that credit unions live in, right? It's outdated. There's definitely some siloing of fraud and compliance systems. This is really increasing overall risk. So this edition of the Tech Showcase will unpack real-time fraud risk management that's going to leverage AI solutions for onboarding transactions, monitoring, underwriting, authenticating events, and so much more. And joining me on this journey, I'm happy to welcome, is Ravi Sandepudi, the CEO and founder of Effectiv. So this is pretty exciting. So let me just take a quick moment and introduce Effectiv here. Effectiv is a real-time fraud and risk management platform for credit unions that enables AI-driven solutions for onboarding, transaction monitoring, underwriting, and authentication events, and so much more. Welcome, Ravi. So let's start off, Ravi. We've got so much to cover, and we're really going to be walking kind of over three different pieces here. We've got fraud, we've definitely got money movement, and we really are living in such an exciting world. Let's kind of jump into, all of it right now. So let's kick it off and let's walk through. Tell us a little bit about fraud and the BSA programs that are facing so much pressures.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for the very kind introduction. As you mentioned, I'm Ravi, one of the co-founders of Effectiv, and we are an end-to-end risk management platform designed very specifically for credit unions. And like you mentioned, we are seeing a huge evolution in this space over the recent past. Especially a lot of these developments are happening on the fintech side, but now we're seeing that proliferating in the traditional banking and credit union side as well, because all of this in the end is to improve the member experience, right? And one of the things there is to the trend that we're seeing is, like you said, the merging of BSA ML and fraud processes within the organization, and to build one unified risk strategy, right? So why are these processes currently run separately when in the end you're trying to find the bad person or the bad guy trying to enter your credit union or trying to take over an existing member's account? And we are seeing those trends happen quite a bit, and we built Effectiv on top of that thesis, right? So how do you merge these risk processes, starting from BSA ML compliance to fraud evaluations, and even to credit underwriting, which is also a form of risk, right? So if you're able to combine all of these three types of risks and build a uniform strategy, you're able to create very seamless onboarding and transaction experiences for your credit union members. Just moving over the slides, again, this is me. A quick background about myself: started off at Google, part of their risk and fraud team, worked there for almost a decade on Google Pay, trying to build their risk platform and so on. And then had another startup called Simility, where we're building fraud detection software as well. At that point, we were serving larger financial institutions like US Bank and Santander and so on. We got acquired by PayPal, got a wonderful opportunity to work at PayPal on some of their cutting edge payment technologies like Venmo and Braintree and so on. And then finally left to start Effectiv. And our whole motivation and inspiration has been to bring all of that technology and make it available to credit unions as well. So that's about me. And shall I jump into the session, speak a little bit about what we are going to cover today?
Absolutely. So again, I just want everybody to anchor. We want to talk a little bit around what's going on in the environment and kind of how do we understand and what are some best practices. So yes, if you can jump in, we'd love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne. So this is a quick summary of overview of what we are going to cover today during this session. The first is what's the latest security landscape and the tools that are available to safeguard your credit union, right? This is very important because what we are seeing is a lot of the, like a generation before, a lot of the focus of fraudsters was on the larger financial institutions. But with the whole digitization wave that is happening across the industry, we are seeing fraudsters shift their target from larger financial institutions to smaller ones and using the same tactics that they had done before on other organizations. So it is becoming more and more critical for all organizations to have the same type of safeguards that the larger folks do. The second is, continuing on that topic, how do you modernize your credit union's approach to fraud detection, right? How easy or hard is it to upgrade your systems to tackle these new kind of fraud attacks that we're seeing, and how to protect your own members, right? This is not just, like I said, from what's happening on the fraudster side. They're obviously improving their own technology, but the financial landscape is also changing, right? So the member expectations are changing. All the transactions are moving digital. Even onboarding is moving digital. So the branch traffic is going to drop more and more. So your access to your members physically is going to reduce drastically as the time progresses, right? So now in this whole digital world, how are we going to, what's the approach that we are going to take for fraud detection? And then finally, combining fraud detection with AML and compliance evaluations, all of this in one single strategic point of view without spending too much, right? So how are we going to do all of these together is going to be the final topic of today's discussion. Expanding a little bit more on that, and a little bit more focus on AI, right? So all of these technology changes that are happening and the improvements that we are doing on fraud detection, from unifying across BSA and AML, as well as looking at all kinds of events that a member does with the credit union, from onboarding to transactions to authentication events. All of this is possible because of the advances in AI, right? And we are going to talk a little bit about this topic as well, and how we are going to use AI across all of this risk spectrum to monitor our systems. So what are the trends in AI? To begin with, I just wanted to give a little bit of the lay of the land, right? So what's happening right now, right? And from a BSA officer or a fraud analyst point of view at a credit union, the first is obviously there's a lot more increased regulatory burden. We are seeing more pressure from organizations like CFPB pushing a lot of that liability of fraud onto the credit unions. Even if the sometimes, like, if the members themselves are getting scammed into moving money out, the liability might fall on the credit union, right? So how do we build systems in order to not just prevent fraud, but also help members identify that they're getting scammed, right? So this is something of an interesting problem that we are seeing, and how can we use AI to identify this anomalous behavior is something that we're going to talk about. And the second is criminals are attacking from every angle, right? Now, once your engagement with your member becomes fully digital, the avenues for attacks from fraudsters drastically increases, right? So your members can now interact with you from anywhere in the world, which means that fraudsters from anywhere in the world can also target them. So how do we act in those kind of scenarios? And the third one is, how do we do all of this, right? And still reduce friction to member experiences, right? And as credit unions, we do face obviously competition from other fintechs that provide extremely seamless member experiences. So onboarding happens in 90 seconds, transactions are happening instantly. Now, how do we operate in this day and age, right? So how do we ensure that our members as well get the same kind of experience that customers of these fintechs are getting? And then on the fourth point, obviously funds are moving global, folks are becoming global, transactions are happening internationally, commerce has become very, very international. So can we, as credit unions, also operate in this space and provide the same kind of money moving capabilities cross borders, right? But at the same time, we have to protect ourselves. Finally, how can we do all of this
Ravi,
without growth? Sorry, Anne, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, when you look at all of this, and I know you're going to highlight your last bullet here, could you give us a way of thinking about, is there a prioritization? Should there just be one of these, or should we be thinking about all of these?
It's important to think of all of these, and I think they're all very closely tied to each other, right? So you cannot have one without thinking about the other, and it becomes important for any financial institutions to look at, like we talked about before, risk very holistically, right, across the board. And once you're moving digital, right, you get exposed to all of these factors instantly, right? And so it becomes important that we think of all of them at the same time.
Thank you.
It changes a little bit, obviously, depending on maybe if the credit union's charter is limited, probably maybe not. The global movement of funds might fall down the list, but at some point you'll have to support it, right? So you have to think through all of that.
Excellent. Thank you.
And thanks, Anne. Very, very valid question. And then finally, right, like how can we do all of this without building 1,000-member team, right? So can we keep the same team that we have, make them a lot more efficient, enable them to handle these kinds of scenarios in a lot more efficient way, all by using the assistance of AI, right? So now jumping on to the pace of new money movement that's happening, right? And this is the talk of the town right now. A lot of the financial institutions are talking about this because the first is obviously member onboarding is happening digitally. When we spoke with a few credit unions, they have now mentioned that the last 40 to 50% of new members that they've onboarded in the last 3 years, they've never seen them personally, right? And this was never the case about 4 to 5 years ago, where 90% of the membership onboarding happened in branch, right? So now it has fallen down to 50%, and they're seeing that trend happen more and more. And once the onboarding happens, the transactions are also becoming completely digital, right? So the concept of having a physical check, coming over to the branch, depositing it or cashing it is going to go away, right? So it started with mobile check deposits, and now with the launch of FedNow, RTP, and Zelle, even the usage of checks is going to go down eventually, right? And the money is going to move from account to account instantly through these transaction types, right? So again, there is the members are not going to wait for 3 days for paying their buddies for a dinner, right? So it's going to happen instantly, and we need to be prepared for it, right? So our previous operations and methodologies that we used to have for fraud detection cannot operate in that same mode, right? So we don't have 3 days to adjudicate a transaction. Unlike ACH, FedNow, and RTP are one-way transactions, right? So there's no way to pull the money back as well. So how can we evaluate and protect ourselves from fraud in the sub-second time duration, right? So we need to look at new technologies in that place. And then how do we, like I spoke about scams, right? So how do we look at these anomalous transactions as well? So there are some situations where obviously someone takes over an account and initiates a FedNow transactions moving the money out. But there are also situations where the members themselves initiate the transaction or move the money out, but they're getting scammed, right? So you might have heard of the romance scams and elder scams, right? So there's a big popular Netflix show on this as well. And this is happening more and more, right? So real true members get scammed by folks, and they intentionally move the money out. So can we still try and detect this anomalous behavior and throw warnings and help the credit unions intervene in those situations as well? Because in the end, we are here to serve our members, right? So we need to do whatever we can to ensure that our members are protected. So can we do something there as well? And then finally, from a AML and a due diligence perspective as well, with instant payment methods, the transaction volumes are going to grow. Maybe you used to handle a few thousands of checks a month. Now you'll have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of FedNow transactions a month, right? So how can we do AML and transaction monitoring at such high volumes going forward as well? So these are some of the things that we are trying to solve by AI. Sorry, Anne, please.
No, I'm so sorry. I keep stepping over you, and I'm really apologizing. I think there might be just a slight delay, so I apologize for that. Just a quick point on this landscape you're laying out for us. This is a lot to take in. This is exciting because we now get, like you said, immediate access to money from the members' perspective. But in addition to that, though, we're now seeing, members that are joining us that we've never met before and may never meet in person. In addition to that, we have, like you said, this increased opportunity for scans. And so we have this really interesting and kind of, it's an exciting landscape, but it's also a bit overwhelming.
That's right. Yeah, a lot is changing. I think the whole financial technology landscape has so drastically changed over the last 5 years, and I think we are on this precipice of of a big revolution in the US. I've seen it personally. So I'm from India. I've seen this personally happen in India with the launch of this payment method called UPI, which is an instant payment method, right? And
Right.
they're now processing, I think 100 billion transactions every single day. So it's really changed, right? So from street side vendors to like luxury car like merchants, all of them just take UPI. So you just have a mobile phone, there are no cards. You just move money from your account to the merchant's account instantly, pay your friends through UPI. And we've seen that again, similar thing happen in Brazil. And it's going to happen here as well, right? So FedNow and RTP are some of those payment methods that are going to enable this.
Thank you. That was a wonderful example of the speed of how it's happening. Let's reach out to our audience right now and let's tap into a little bit of how they're feeling. Let's pull out our polling and you can see now on your screen, your organization connected to RTP or FedNow, and please select which answer you want, and then we're going to look at those results. All right. We'll give it a minute here for people. Ravi, would you say, you said something that while people are filling out, I want to kind of highlight, and that was when we lose that quote unquote float time, it now becomes much more of a relationship game, right? The relationship that I have to those that are helping me make this payment. And what I loved what you said earlier was about how do we make sure we protect our members?
Yeah, that's critical. I mean, like when I immigrated to the US first, right? The only way I could start my financial journey in the US was through a credit union, right? So I didn't even have a social security number. It was my university's credit union that let me open up a deposit account, because I was literally walking around with traveler's checks. I don't know if people remember those, but in my backpack in Philadelphia, which is coming to think of it right now, I was kind of stupid doing that, but until my university credit union let me open up a deposit account, and then I could move money from India and also pay back my parents, right? So that relationship, and I knew my the person in the credit union by first name. We shared phone numbers, right? So that kind of relationship you never get outside of credit unions, right? And I mean, they felt my need and my success very personally, right? So that kind of connection is what differentiates a credit union from the rest of the banking industry, right? And because of that, maintaining that relationship with the members becomes very critical, and us protecting them from potential scams is also very critical, right? Which might not be the same mindset that other financial institutions have. But how do we do that? And we can do that with new technologies that are available now.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a beautiful story. Hey, let's look at the results. This is pretty enlightening, right? We've got quite a considerable group here. We're kind of broken up in, it looks like the majority is no, we want to learn more about faster payments. So yay, glad we're discussing it. Yeah. And we do have a nice group that is saying, look, we're close to launching it. So I'd like to just kind of say, look, everybody, you're in the right tech showcase right here. So hey, Ravi, why don't we continue on? We've got so much more to cover.
Cool. Yeah. Take control. That's great to hear. So everyone is at least curious about faster payments and RTP and FedNow. So that's great to hear. And we had one person also say that they're worried about fraud. So let me go back to the slides, right? So yeah, how do we handle these situations, right? Fully digital member onboardings, instant payments, sub-second response times, volumes going up exponentially. How do we do all of this? And today we are going to talk a little bit about that, right? So what are the technologies and the tools that are now available for credit unions to move into this new era of finance. So the first one, obviously, is to use the power of AI, right? So I'm sure many of us have already tried ChatGPT and like could see the clear drastic improvements in machine learning and AI that has happened over the last couple of years. And we are able to now leverage all of that in fraud detection and process automation as well. So that's the first piece. The second is there are so many data intelligence providers now in the market, and you can utilize their data intelligence to take very precise and very subjective calls on when you're adjudicating a transaction or a membership application, right? So for example, there is the LexisNexuses of the world, the TransUnions, and there are also new age players like Secure and CentiLink who provide very specific data about entities like, hey, what is the validity of this email address, right? How old is the domain? What is the reputation of the email domain? Is this IP address a Tor node? Is it a VPN? Is it a cloud IP? Is it from what location is it coming? And so on. So if you look at hundreds of thousands of these entities and looking at intelligence of each of them, there are multiple of these providers, right? So how can we combine and use the power of all of these data and intelligence providers and finally adjudicate whether that member who's applying for a deposit account is he the right person, or is he or she a fraudster, right? The second is we now have seen a lot of these patterns elsewhere across the world and in other organizations, and we have now been able to really templatize some of these strategies, right? Combining all of these third-party data services, having models ready that you can literally click and enable and use right out of the box, right? So you don't need to do a lot of customization now unless you really want to. And then now that we have the power of the cloud, solutions are infinitely scalable, right? And very, very quick. And these operate in that sub-second response times, right? So they're able to handle thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions to billions of transactions every day. These systems are able to do that. And obviously the new innovations in the user interface and things of that sort, from a drag and drop, no interfaces, no need to write code. You can literally generate strategies by clicking your mouse and dragging and dropping, which I'll try to show right away after this as well. And all of this combined with human interaction through a case management system and lifecycle management system and so on. Right, so all of these are new developments in the fraud and risk management space that are now available for everyone to use. Right? Obviously, we are one of the players in this space.
Sorry, Ravi.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, what's really exciting is to see how well you bulleted out the power that AI can be used here and how it can be used to keep everybody safe. And I'm very looking forward to seeing how you demo that. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, on that note, and so let me jump onto a quick demo for the next few minutes to just give you a taste of what's possible from a risk and fraud management point of view. Let me share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Nope, I'm not seeing it yet. Try again, please. Should be in this share screen. There we go. There we go. Perfect.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne. So, folks, like what you're seeing is obviously the Effectiv interface. So this is what our users see day in and day out. We try to, like we mentioned in multiple points during the slides today, we try to provide this unified multi-channel fraud and risk management platform for our credit unions, right? And as you can see, our customers can use our platform for evaluating multiple kinds of member events, starting from ACH transactions to check deposits to underwriting to login to member onboardings and so on and so forth. So any kind of member interaction can be evaluated on our platform. And the main advantage of doing that is we try to tie all of this data behind the scenes and create a 360-degree view of that member, right? I'll give you an example. So let's say someone comes to your credit union branch at 4 p.m., opens up a deposit account, goes to their mobile app and does a mobile check deposit at 4:30 p.m. So you approve you do some early validations, their account gets funded, and then at 5:30 p.m. they go to an ATM and withdraw the cash, all the cash out, right? If you look at each of these events individually, they're completely fine, right? Someone applying for a deposit account, someone depositing a check, someone going to an ATM and withdrawing some cash out. But when you look at all of these three together and at the frequency at which they've happened, basically all these three events happening within the span of 1 hour, you see that there is something suspicious happening, right? So this is probably a scenario of money laundering or some kind of a mule account being taken over, right? And that you are able to see only when you are able to stitch all these events together and are able to create this 360-degree view of that member, right? And that's the philosophy that we follow. And that's why we help our credit unions enable and pass all of these events and adjudicate an event when we identify the risk propensity has gone up. Right? So this is the UI, and we provide obviously the dashboards and reports for our users to quickly see what's happening, what kind of fraud losses they have noticed, if they're federally chartered or if they have locations. You can also segment the various traffic that you're seeing and get a quick sense of what's happening from a risk management point of view at the credit union, right? There's also an operations dashboard. So we ship a case management system. So if you want to see how the cases are being reviewed, what's the SLA and things of that sort, all of that is possible on our platform as well. We also support reports to pull data out of Effectiv, right? So that's one way. That's the first way we help our credit unions to get a big picture of what's happening from a fraud management and the risk management perspective, right? The second is, which is the more important and critical part and the heart of Effectiv, is our workflows, where we are able to combine multiple third-party data services and our models, and you're able to quickly see and construct risk strategies, right? So let me open this up, and this is how we are able to express the risk strategy for example, for a member onboarding flow, right? So we get the data from your account opening platform or from your core banking system. We are doing some validations like normalizing the name, calling our AI models, looking up some golden customer checks. If they're not a pre-approved person, right? If they're a pre-approved person, you auto approve. If not, then you do some additional validations, right? So Centilink is one of our partners, so we call them for SSN validations. If they say the abuse score is high, you auto decline. If not, you do some step-up verifications by calling LexisNexis and Secure and so on, right? And then finally, you have your rules where you have these thresholds set. And based on those thresholds, you either decline the application or send it for manual review, right? And this is one of the templates that we provide for our customers, and you can pick these templates and start using from the first day onwards, right? So you don't need to figure all of these things out on your own. If you already do a bunch of these validations, we try to automate that workflow for you on Effectiv, right? For example, let's say after secure, we want to call a service called check systems, which is an FIS system, right? So that has information about the account that is funding this new deposit account that they might have created. You literally like drag and drop enrichment step. You say, hey, I want to look up qualifile, disconnect this flow, connect here, and that's about it, right? So now check systems is being called within that risk evaluation strategy, and you can use what check system is saying about this funding event and use that value to basically adjudicate whether you want to approve or decline or manually review this new application, right? So it's that simple. And then there are other things that you can do within platforms like ours, like running back testing. So let's say I've changed my strategy and I want to test it over some past applications that I've seen. I can quickly pick those past applications, run some tests, and then see the output of those tests right away, right? So you can quickly evaluate how you're changing, how the changes you've made to the strategies is going to impact your new member onboarding application and so on. So that's one way. These are some of the new developments in technologies that are available for all of us to use, right? And this helps us create very sophisticated and very nuanced risk management strategies for all of our members, right? So for example, let's say I've seen this example in the past, right? So some of our credit union customers where they were noticing fraud with Zelle transactions, right? And to tackle that issue, they reduced the limit for Zelle transactions so low to $10 a day that their members just stopped using Zelle. So obviously the fraud losses fell to zero, but it also meant that they were practically, like Zelle was practically unusable by their members, right? So there is a much better way to do this by creating very specific step-up style fraud detection and validation systems like ours to add friction only when we notice that something bad is happening, right? So if we have enough history about that member, we know that something is anomalous, we can then only trigger additional validations, right? Like a two-factor auth, or stopping the transaction, or triggering a case for someone to call and verify whether they're intending to do this transaction or not. So not all members need to face the heat because of some fraud issues. So we can maintain really seamless member experience for majority of our members, because majority of them are very good, right? But once we notice something suspicious happening, then we can do those step-up validations like we can do within our platform, right? So that's the first piece. And then finally, there is the case management system as well, which could be very useful. And we have done a lot of research and development here. And again, the case management system as well, we are utilizing AI to help the BSA and fraud analysts within the credit unions to really improve their processes, make them more efficient, and so on, right? So this is an example case. We show all the data that's available across our data partners and the ML scores that we are computing. There are visualizations to see, hey, they're saying that their home address they provided is from California, but their IP address is from Arizona, right? So in this case, it's not too suspicious, but let's say the IP is from Russia, then obviously their suspicion level goes up. And then we also do something called as case linking, where you can see that, hey, the secondary phone that they provided in the application was used by 5 other applications, right? Or the device IP address was used in multiple other applications and so on. So again, you can see that you can take a more subjective call on whether this is looking suspicious or not. You can leave your notes, take a decision whether to approve or decline. And then finally, we are also integrated with FinCEN. So if you want to file a suspicious activity report, it's all pre-filled, so you don't need to fill each of these fields manually. Our narrative is also auto-generated using our AI model. So you just click this button, we look at all the historical transactions that have performed, what has happened, are there any related applications or related transactions that we have seen in the past, and we create a beautiful narrative based on past narratives we have trained our models on, and that's about it, right? The whole narrative is ready, you click on finalize report, and then file to FinCEN right from our platform. So just wanted to show a quick preview and overview of some of these technologies that are available for credit unions now.
That is fantastic, Ravi. I just want to say there's a couple things I just loved about seeing the visualizations here. Number one is it is powerful to see the power of connected data. You've done just a beautiful job saying, look, there's a lot of data out there, credit unions, and you really need to make sure you've got that buttoned up. I think the second thing is allowing the credit union to have many different lenses on risk, right? We have the big picture, we have sort of the segmented lens, we also have the beautiful workflow of risk strategy. That was gorgeous. And then what I loved is how you made this all turnkey. This is very easy for a credit union to get in and be able to look at this incredible situation and make it not only safe for the member, but actually make it a better user experience for the member as well.
That's right.
Is there anything else I missed? That was a really wonderful demo.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was a great summary, and thanks a lot. And that's exactly what we want to do, and how we want to serve our credit unions.
Excellent, excellent. I think, do we have one more slide, or are we ready for Q&A?
Yeah, just one, I think, just to summarize everything, what I showed, right? So from transaction monitoring to case management, and the power of combining both onboarding events to transaction to login events and so on in one single platform, and creating that 360-degree view of that member gives so much power and flexibility in creating very nuanced risk strategies within the credit union, right? And using the power of AI, so filling up suspicious activity reports with one click, detecting anomalous transactions, detecting fraud, and so on. In fact, we have a new beta feature that we are going to launch pretty soon, where for commercial entities that are applying for an account with a credit union, you can run business validations through our AI models, right? So our models go scrape the web for the business's websites, validates whether it's a legitimate business, are the beneficial owners good people, and gives you a nice consolidated report about that business with one single click, right? So all of this is now possible due to the advances in machine learning and AI.
So Ravi, it kind of makes you wonder, what will a credit union do with a lot of time that they get back because they would have so much of this automated? It kind of makes you think about, wow, they can really use, especially since talent is something that is, a very big challenge for credit unions. It's nice that there's something out there that will allow them to be able to scale quickly and not necessarily have to hire more talent.
Exactly. Focus on the member experience, right? And like the credit union pen CU changed my life, right? So I think there is so
Right.
much more we can do with like the human time, which is more precious, right? So rather than sitting and reviewing each individual application or transaction and filling up sad narratives and things of that sort, rather create those relationships with the members and make them successful, right? So that's a thing that can really change
Absolutely.
the game.
No, that's exactly what we're talking about, is how do we make sure that we keep giving more of what we do really well in the credit union industry. Hey, we have a couple questions. So let me start off with one. How do you guys combine fraud rules with know the customer plus ALM? What kind of fraud checks do you suggest, the industry do?
Yeah, so like some of the examples I showed within that workflow, and we have a bunch of these KYC and AML checks that are pre-built. We follow the regulations closely. We ensure we are best in class in the industry and so on. So that, again, as a credit union, you don't need to be always worried about, hey, what kind of fraud patterns are happening? Are my rules updated? Are there new regulations published that I have to be careful about from an AML perspective and things of that sort? We keep all of that refreshed and up to date. So you can just use our pre-built templates. If you have an in-house expert team on fraud and AML, you can jump onto our platform and tweak and customize it yourself, right? So we try to support both kind of models. Our strong suggestion is just to start using ours that we have pre-built, and then combining that with and using that unified risk strategies that look at both AML checks and KYC checks and fraud checks together makes your life a lot more easier.
And let's just highlight that for a minute. You are providing already the templates that have been pretty much given the green light with compliance.
That's right. So they've been validated by a bunch of our existing customers. We learn from them. We snoop. We look at all the new changes that are happening, even in like dark web forums and things of that sort. We keep ourselves updated what's happening on the bad side, on the good side, and ensuring that these templates are up to date. And these do a bunch of things for you already, right? Like I mentioned, looking at the email address, looking at the IP address, looking at social security number, looking at physical address, and using the best-in-class data intelligence providers, training our models, our rules, and so on to finally confidently say whether this member is good or this transaction is good or not.
Well, that brings up a really good point. How do you handle transaction monitoring in conjunction with identity verification?
A great question. And so it's very interesting. So our hypothesis and thesis is on adding friction only when truly needed. And because we have a single platform that can do both, what we are able to do is, let's say, when you get a member onboarding event, right? Someone is applying for a membership, and then we notice a little bit of a fraud risk, right? So maybe the email domain that they've provided as a primary email is new, right? It doesn't have a lot of reputation, looks a little bit suspicious. So instead of stopping the membership application from going through, we remember that there was a little bit of a fraud risk at the time of application, right? Now we are a little more careful once a money movement event happens with that member, right? So now let's say they funded the account, they have $1,000 in the account, but within the third day, they are moving $950 to a brand new bank account that that we've not known or that we haven't seen in the past, right? It's across multiple states or maybe even international, right? So now we know that there was a little bit of a fraud risk that we've noticed at account opening time. We flow that risk and use that risk score to adjudicate the transaction. If you look at it independently, maybe you don't have enough info. Maybe you approve that transaction or not. But now that we know that there was a bit of fraud risk when the membership application was opening, we are able to now say that, hey, there's also a little bit of fraud risk in this transaction. So we add up both the fraud risks and say, hey, this has crossed the threshold. Now let's do something, right? Now let's add a two-factor auth, or let one of our customer reps or membership reps call them and confirm that this is what they're going to do. Right. And then again, right after that, they initiate another transaction. We keep adding on to the risk, and then at some point, maybe even block the account and things like that.
That is powerful. And again, it is such a wonderful example of how when you get a very 360-degree lens of the member, now you can be making these very strategic and automated, examples. We are running close to time here, but we have one other question I'd love for us to answer, and that would be, can you share some stats about how much fraud this system saves either credit unions on average, or can you pull out just a little bit and help us understand the impact?
Yeah, no, great question. I think it depends. Obviously, we work with credit unions of different sizes. One of the financial institutions, they're on the larger end. For them, we just released a case study. We are saving about $31 million in losses every single month, right? So it starts from there. But obviously, for the smaller credit unions, it would be on a smaller scale. But the most important thing that we do immediately is on operational savings, right? So by default, we reduce your operational costs by 50%. So either by increasing the speed at which you can approve new membership applications, or the time it takes for you to approve a membership application, or the time it takes for someone to approve a check deposit or an ACH, or a wire, right? So we just reduce your operational costs by 50% in the first 3 weeks that we implement, right? That's because of all the automation that we can do through our AI models and through our workflow automation system and so on. And then eventually, based on your risk appetite as a credit union, right? So let's say you want to really capture a lot of new members, you have a slightly higher fraud budget, we can tune the models to allow more members to come in so that you can grow your membership, again, based on your risk appetite, right? But let's say you are launching a new financial product where you want to have zero fraud, right? You have very low risk appetite. We can again tune back our models to be very conservative, so that we don't allow any fraud to come in, right? So it's a balance that we can work with our credit union for.
Well, this has just been fantastic. It's not every day that we get to see the power of connected data to fight fraud, but also to get it to improve the member experience. I think this is fantastic. I say with that, this has been a wonderful tech showcase, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jeff for just some final notes and say thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Ravi.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, and thank you, everyone. And that does bring us to the end of this presentation. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we hope this is valuable to you. And also, I want to extend a special thanks to Ravi and Anne for their time and insights, and Effectiv for their support. If you missed any part of this presentation, remember it will be archived shortly at www.cutimes.com/webcast, so you can view it again or refer it to someone else. You can explore other upcoming and on-demand presentations while you're there. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.